Hey you! Thanks for tuning into The Restart. My name is Kevin O'Sleeper because today we're going to be discussing sleeper contenders for the NBA Finals. Let's get The Restart rolling. All 22 teams have arrived at Disney World. They've left quarantine. They're back at practice. They're out fishing. They're throwing fish back in the water with the wrong hand. They're getting dubs in Warzone. They're shotgunning beers, and they're getting tested every single day. So far, everything's going according to plan. Fingers crossed that this continues to work. But it's those positive cases of COVID-19 that underline the uncertainty that the league is facing right now. Conversations with people across the league reveal a pretty consistent school of thought. Right now, the playoffs could be more volatile than ever before because of the amount of variables that the league has. Here are some of the ideas and thoughts that people have had that could affect the on-court product and thus the finals race. Of course, we have conditioning, skill development, and system changes that could have happened while players and coaches were away from the court. There's the physical and mental health aspect. How do players deal with being away from home for so long? How do they cope with the stress that they'll have being on campus? Right now, players seem happy. They're out having fun. But what happens when the DJ sets and the table tennis all get old and they're away from their loved ones? What happens when they just can't deal with the Orlando humidity any longer? Then the fact that there's early starts for the entire first round. Some guys aren't as good getting up early. They're playing at neutral sites without crowd noise in arenas that are unfamiliar. Some of the backdrops for shooters could be different than they're used to with full crowds. And of course, there's the big one, coronavirus. Any player could test positive if they're in the wrong place at the wrong time, as we've already seen with a bunch of guys testing positive. Point being, this is an environment ripe for potential upsets. The Lakers, Bucks, and Clippers are heavy betting favorites, and odds fall off a cliff for every team after that. But looking at these numbers, I would feel good about any team from the Rockets to the Thunder having at least a chance of pulling off an upset with so many variables at play. So for today's main story, let's look at one team from each conference that could end up being a final sleeper and what the factors are that are in their control that they need to break right for them to make a long finals run. Let's kick things off with the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavs are the 7th seed in the Western Conference right now, but they have the league's #1 offense by far. They outscore the second place Rockets by 2.4 points per 100 possessions, which is the same differential between the Rockets and the 14th place Thunder. And that's all largely thanks to Luka Doncic, who is posting a LeBronian 29, 9, and 9. He had arguably the greatest season ever for a 20-year-old player, comparable only to LeBron James himself in the 04-05 season. Luka was a top 5 player this season, and he's likely going to be 3rd or 4th on my official NBA MVP ballot. And that matters because having a top 5 to top 10 player is basically a necessity for finals contention. If you look historically at teams that have actually won it all, most teams have either a top 50 all-time player or a guy that's someday going to be that after they retire, with the exception of the 04 Pistons, their defensive-oriented team. We'll talk a little bit about them later. Yeah, with Luka, it's going to be his first exposure to the postseason, but Luka is different, and he has a game built for playoff basketball. Luka can score all over the court, and he doesn't just feast on bad competition. He scores at a high level against the game's best players. Look at this play here against Anthony Davis. Right here, he gets the switch and he changes rhythm with his hezzy hang dribble, and then it looks like he's about to go into a split, which is what he needs to create the separation to launch the step back jumper over AD's long arms. You try that move and your ankles are going to be screaming at you. And this is what was so laughable about the people saying Luka wasn't a great athlete before the draft. Athleticism is more than big dunks and verticality, and Luka can have that in his game, but it's about acceleration, de-acceleration. It's about pliability and body control, and Luka is elite in all of those areas, which is why he looks like he's using a cheat code when he's moving around the court. Luka's getting known for his filthy step-back jumper, but he can score from anywhere on the court. He's got the pull-up mid-range jumper. He's got floaters and runners in the lane, and he's one of the league's best at scoring at the rim. Look at these absurd numbers that he posted this season. Pretty comparable to what LeBron James did. And this footage here backs up the numbers. Look how low he gets against PJ Tucker, lowering his shoulder like a running back going into the line. Notice the slight hesitation right here as he turns the corner, and that causes Tucker to pause too. Luka's head is where Tucker's waist is as he drives, and he has the elite body control and coordination to pull off moves like this. It's one of the reasons why he also draws fouls at a pretty high rate. Luka's one of the best playmakers in the NBA as well. He has omnidirectional vision, meaning that he can make any pass in any direction at any angle. Watching Luka is like a masterclass in geometry with the types of passes that he makes all over the court. So the Mavericks have a championship caliber player in Luka, but every other team obviously knows that too. Multiple coaches I spoke with around the league brought up the fact that they're expecting Luka to get more defensive attention in the playoffs. He faced some double teams during the season from teams like Denver and Orlando, and he fared pretty well. I mean, right here, he passed out of the double, and then Kristaps Porzingis made a pretty nice pass to the corner shooter. But the postseason could be different. One coach in particular brought up the fact that maybe Luka could get the James Harden treatment. Harden, of course, has faced traps and double teams at an all-time level this year. However, there is a difference between Harden and Luka. Harden, a lot of his actions are stationary. He dribbles the ball up and gets into pick and rolls and isolations. But with Luka, Rick Carlisle uses movement to get him the ball. Carlisle has sets in place like this Iverson cut as Luka sprints across the floor to get into positioning for the pick and roll. They have give and goes with a handoff paving his way to the rim, or a handoff straight into a pick and roll. Luka is highly skilled off the ball, and he understands positioning and uses the same types of fakes to get his defenders off balance to get open. The Mavs love to have Luka inbound the ball, then sprint towards the receiver to get the ball back on a handoff. But here, he gets fronted, so he uses a shake and bake maneuver to get to the rim for the dunk. There's another good example right here. A pick and pop with Porzingis, and Luka cuts right to the rim after the pass is made. In the playoffs, maybe Luka can just start cutting more to the rim off ball, which would lower his on-ball usage. Of course, that would put more responsibility on his teammates. For the Mavericks to make a deep run, they need Kristaps Porzingis to be the star that he's shown he can be in spurts, as the paint protector, anchoring their defense, as the deep three-point shooter spacing the floor, and as the guy who makes the right play as the pass. Kristaps, of course, has his limitations after one dribble on the offensive end, but that's what makes somebody like Seth Curry so important. Jalen Brunson is out, which leaves Curry, JJ Barea, and the newly signed Trey Burke as their only ball handlers in the backcourt, so Curry's likely going to see an uptick in his usage. Seth isn't Steph, but he's a really, really good player this year for Dallas, hitting over 40% of his threes. And with Luka, they have some pretty good chemistry. In late January, we started to see the Mavericks run this double high screen action with KP and Luka screening for Curry, who's given options. He can shoot, or he can pass to KP at the wing, or to Luka in the corner. KP himself could roll in this action, and Luka has a cut available too. I'd love to see the Mavericks try to have Luka set some screens for Seth Curry, similar to what Seth's brother Steph has done for years with Draymond Green. Different types of players here, but Luka can pop, or he can roll, and just imagine what he could do if he received the ball in the short roll, just like Draymond Green has for years on the Warriors. The Mavericks are probably lacking the type of secondary ball handler they need who's better than Seth Curry or better than Tim Hardaway. They need a wing defender who can shoot better than Dorian Finney-Smith. And right now, they're going to be reliant quite a lot on Maxi Kleber to get stops on the defensive end. Kleber's good, but he's not a high-end lockdown defender. And if they face the Clippers in round one, as they would right now with the current seedings, I don't love their chances at stopping Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. But they do have an opportunity to move up with the seeding games. They're only a game and a half back from Houston and 2.5 games back from Utah. If they move up, they can beat any of their other potential matchups. And if they advance past the first round, anything can happen. Because when you have a star player like Luka, anything is possible. Anything's possible! Moving on to the Eastern Conference, let's talk Toronto Raptors. The defending champs have shown they're not just a one-hit wonder. This season, they have the NBA's second best defensive rating, and they're tied with the Clippers for the third best overall net rating. They're full of high IQ, high-effort players who have elite fundamentals and great team chemistry, and their system is engineered by the NBA's best head coach, Nick Nurse. The Raptors' defense is the number one reason for their success this season. Good offenses tend to exploit space in order to score baskets, whether it's penetrating towards the rim or kicking out a pass to an open shooter. But the Raptors close those gaps with their long, rangy defenders like OG Anunoby, Chris Boucher, and Pascal Siakam. On a standard possession, the Raptors shade their off-ball players toward the primary ball handler. See here, Ibaka and Siakam are basically in the paint off their own guys, and Lowry is taking away Beal's driving lane as he turns the corner, and then Beal makes the sloppy pass. They force the second most turnovers in the NBA, largely because of the pressure they put on opponents, forcing them into mistakes. And you can see that again here. They're making the floor small by packing the paint as OG draws a charge on Ben Simmons. If the player does drive, they don't hesitate to overhelp either, swiping at the ball on those opportunities. And when the ball gets fed into the post, they double team more than any team in the league, forcing players to panic and throw inaccurate passes, just as Giannis does right here. The Raptors do all the little things that go beyond the box score. The play-by-play here will record this as a mid-range jumper missed by Emmanuel Mudiay, but it all started because OG Anunoby tightly covered Mitchell as he crossed half court, preventing the handoff from Joe Ingles, and then the ball never was able to touch his hands again. Toronto's preference to stop penetration means they allow a lot of three-pointers, but that's okay because their three-point defense is so stellar. They close out aggressively on shooters, and if they're not running them off the line, they're forcing them into really difficult shots. The Raptors are unpredictable too. They switch up their pick and roll coverages more than any team in the league. Like in this mid-January game against the Hawks, they had Ibaka show on Trae Young pick and rolls, but then the next game against Philly, they switched nearly every single screen. Sometimes they'll have Gasol show, sometimes he'll blitz, sometimes he'll drop. They always do something different depending on the opponent, and that can change within a game and not just game to game as well. And for Nick Nurse, he switches up his lineups all the time too. They could play big with Gasol and Ibaka, or they can just play with one of those guys, and sometimes they can even go super small if they need to. Few teams have as much lineup flexibility as the Raptors do to adapt and dictate matchups in a playoff series. Discipline is required to play this style. A team like the Bulls tried it. They were swarming all over the court, but they were often out of position or they were fouling. The Raptors have a bunch of guys who don't make mistakes. The paint is anchored by two veterans, Gasol and Ibaka. They have Pest on the perimeter and Fred VanVleet and Kyle Lowry, and they have all of those aforementioned long wing defenders. And plus, they have Nick Nurse. They don't have Jim Boylan. Nurse pushes all the right buttons on a game-to-game basis, on a possession-to-possession basis. Anytime you talk with somebody around the league, they always seem to bring up Nick Nurse and how good he is. Last week, I had a conversation with somebody from a different team who called him the Bill Belichick of the NBA. That's high praise, considering the amount of success Belichick has had in the NFL. But you can kind of see his point with the way Nurse coaches his NBA team, with making adjustments during the regular season, not sticking to his system, but also doing unorthodox things in the postseason. This season, the Raptors have played zone defense more than any team but the Miami Heat, which is something they did in last year's finals when they used a box and one defense against Stephen Curry. This year, they've done it against a handful of players as well, like right here against the Houston Rockets with OG Anunoby and James Harden hanging out at the edge of the screen right at half court as everybody else plays 4-on-4. Russ drives, but peekaboo, Kyle Lowry hiding behind Capella intercepts the pass and brings it back the other way. Or here, you can see Norman Powell stalking Harden as they go up the court, and Harden eventually does get the ball, but Marc Gasol is there to take away his drive and take the charge. They also ran the box and one against Lou Williams and Trae Young. They've used a triangle and 2-zone against Damian Lillard. And of course, they've used a standard 2-3 zone against a long list of teams. In this play here, Boston wastes over half the play passing around the perimeter. And as soon as Cantor gets it, help is there. And what a crazy deflection by Hollis Jefferson to get his mid on that pass. Playing any zone defense is hard, and offenses can't exploit it with their shooting and ball movement in today's league. But look at the zone like an off-speed pitch in baseball, like a curveball or a splitter, or like a boxer switching stances for a single round. It can be something that flummoxes an offense and throws them off their rhythm. In a potential series against the Bucks, all of these traits could be valuable, whether it's their length, fundamentals or their unpredictability and giving themselves an opportunity to get an upset. The question for Toronto will be, can they score enough? The Raptors had only the 18th ranked half-court offense this season, according to Cleaning the Glass. And part of their offensive struggles was due to injury. They used 15 different starting lineups this year and lost over 200 total games to injury. They're healthy now, though. Gasol looks like he's in the best shape of his life, possibly. And Nick Nurse has suggested that maybe moving forward, they'll run more offense through Gasol. We'll see, though. There's no guarantees here. As it is, Gasol's role right now is fine, spacing the floor, doing a little bit of facilitating, but it would be interesting if they take a page out of what Memphis did with Marc Gasol and run some more offense through him to get some good things happening for that offense. Thus far this season, it's obviously been Kyle Lowry who's initiated offense, but we've also seen Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet both take a leap. Siakam in particular has been fascinating to watch. He's gone from a guy that used to stand in the corner for spot-up threes to a guy who's initiating offensive sets, running pick and roll, running isolations, and he's done really well. He's not the MVP candidate that he was early in the year, but he's still an all-NBA caliber player, and that's something for Toronto. We're going to have to see if he makes another level of improvement after what was like a shortened off season between the end of the season in March and the restart of the season in late July. Ultimately, if Toronto makes a title run, it's going to be because of their defense. They got to be like the 04 Pistons, who had an historic run on their way to a finals back then. And for Detroit, they created offensive opportunities with their stops. They created early offense opportunities on the break. Toronto runs more than anybody except for the Milwaukee Bucks. And they're going to have to keep creating those opportunities and taking advantage of those opportunities in the postseason because they don't have a great half-court offense, but they do have a great transition offense. So they got to continue creating those to continue scoring buckets at a high rate. They're obviously going to miss Kawhi Leonard. They don't even make the finals last year without him. But when you consider this funky environment that could favor teams with continuity and chemistry, the Raptors could be better set up than anyone. We focus on Dallas's high-powered offense and Toronto's versatile defense, but there are a handful of other teams that do belong in that sleeper conversation. I wouldn't fault you for gambling on Miami this year. A lot of the same things that were said about Toronto also apply to them. They're versatile on the defensive end of the floor, and on offense, they have a bunch of guys who are unselfish that can shoot and pass the ball. And they have a great coach in Eric Spoelstra. And then you have a team like the Boston Celtics. They were not healthy this year, and yet they were top 6 in both offensive and defensive rating. Their 5 best players have only played 14 games together this year. They're going to need Kemba to stay healthy. Brad Stevens recently said that he's slowly working his way back to health. He's got to get back to what he was early in the season and in past years in Charlotte. And the Celtics need Tatum to be the star scorer that he was prior to the league shutdown. We actually made a full video breaking down Tatum's progress back in early March, so go check that out by finding the link in the description below. The Sixers were actually my pick to make the NBA Finals before the season began, but I've soured on them quite a lot over the course of the year. I gotta see some creativity on offense from Brett Brown. I gotta see Ben Simmons actually space the floor from behind the line. With the Sixers, maybe I'll feel better about them after the seeding games, but right now there are just too many questions about what that team can be on the offensive end of the floor. Out west, Denver is obviously a contender on paper as the 3 seed, but Jokic just got back to the United States after testing positive for coronavirus, and multiple other guys haven't arrived at Disney World yet. Michael Porter, Gary Harris, and Torrey Craig, all potential key players for them. So it's hard to feel comfortable saying Denver is an actual contender until Jokic is actually on campus with some of his other key teammates. Same goes for the Rockets. They are built to potentially upset the Lakers or the Clippers, and I'd love to do a full video breakdown of them in the coming month. However, with Harden and Westbrook both not at Disney yet, they're another team that's dealing with coronavirus issues. I honestly don't feel great about Utah without Bojan Bogdanovic. I know he's not a big name, but he was their 3rd best player this season behind Mitchell and Gobert. He creates offense for them. He can play off ball of Mitchell. He's a solid defender. They're going to miss him, especially if Mike Conley isn't back to being the Mike Conley that we knew in Memphis. And then with Oklahoma City, they're fun, man. I love watching SGA and Chris Paul. I love watching Steven Adams, but I don't think they have enough firepower, and I don't think they're great enough defensively to be a team in the Western Conference that can make a finals run. We're about 2 weeks away from basketball resuming. I am pumped and jacked to see some basketball being played, and I know The favorites usually win, and maybe that could happen again this year. But with everybody at Disney World, everything's different. Everything's weird. Thank you so much for watching this week. Please do me a favor and thank the crew for putting this video together. And go down and hit the like button and subscribe to the Ringers YouTube channel. Really appreciate you watching. Peace out.